And we're live. Woo-hoo!
Hi, Jerry.
Hey,
Nice to meet
Phil.
you.
Same here. Same here. Hey, Tim. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I was just saying in the pre-chat, I run into Jerry again at Podcast Movement, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was on your show a long time ago. You're on mine.
I'm glad you said something that morning because I saw you and I saw your name tag. I'm like, oh, Tim Lewis. I know a Tim Lewis. And then I heard you talk to the group that I had just barged in on. I'm like, yeah, there's probably more than one Tim Lewis who looks just like the Tim Lewis I know, who sounds just like the Tim Lewis I know. I'm like, what is the coincidence? And you finally spoke up. I'm like, Jerry, you idiot. That is Tim Lewis.
Yeah. So let's start off with anybody, the 1% of the world population that hasn't heard of the Beyond the Rut podcast.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about when you started it, what the show's about?
Yeah.
And also where you're going and what your hopes are for the podcast.
Nice. So Beyond the Rut began, its first episode launched August 15th, 2015. Give or take it. Yeah, it's 2015. There was a 3-person venture, myself, my friend Brandon, and our other friend Sean. And the idea was, the three of us, we'd served in Christian men's ministry together. And Brandon, who is a pastor and still is a pastor, he was just answering the same questions over and over and over every Sunday for the same men. How do I, get stronger in my faith walk? How do I have stronger relationships with my wife and my children and, get them to mind me? Or, how do I become a better husband, a better father? My job sucks. How do I make more money? And he was just giving the same advice all the time. And then also in all this was, I feel called to be a writer, or I feel called to be an artist, or to go into business for myself. And so he would have these conversations, and years later, same guys, same exact problems. They've done nothing to get out of the rut they were in. And so the three of us said, let's start a podcast, because I was already podcasting on a different show I started called Family Time Q&A, where I allowed my family. I didn't allow them. It was their idea. Well, I offered it to my son. Let's have a father-son show, unscripted. You ask me anything you want, and it's just me giving advice to my son. It'll be awesome. Feed my ego, blah, blah, blah. Well, my daughter gets in and says, well, what if we just make it where you rotate family members? You have no idea what the question is going to be. You just answer and post that unedited. I'm like, okay. And so that's how Brandon recruited me to be the production guy on his show. So we aim to help men who are Christian. They're in their 30s and 40s. They're married. They have children. They check all the boxes of what the American dream is: the house, the cars, the office with a view, the title, the 6-figure income, all those things. But if you were to be inside their mind or their heart in that moment, you'd realize they feel stuck. They feel stuck in life. They feel stuck in their families. They feel stuck in general. And they're asking themselves, is this all there is? And so Beyond the Rut has always been that show about sharing encouraging stories of other people who also felt the same way and got unstuck in either their faith walk, their family life, their fitness, their finances, or their future success. And so that's where we've been. Sean left the show, I think 16 episodes in. He realized it wasn't his cup of tea in a sense. Brandon, he retired from the show in March 2021 because one thing he didn't have then that he does have now is 5 grandchildren. So he was like, I'd rather be a grandpa now. I'm like, all right, well, I'd rather carry on the torch. I don't have grandkids yet. Let's see how far I can go with this. So for the last 2 years, I've been running Beyond the Rut on my own, keeping the torch going, regrouping the show, dusting off our original business plan from 7 years ago, and realizing we hadn't done any of it. So the show, in a sense, was in a rut, and I've spent the last year and a half getting us out of there and really living up to the thing we've intended, which is, again, to help men in their 30s and 40s who are married. They've got children. They feel stuck in life. It turns out that kind of message, even though we're pinpointing a specific type of person, the audience is mixed, 50-50 men and women. Sometimes there are more women listening to the show than there are men. And not everybody listens to the show as Christian, because we've never really been the Bible thumping kind of Christian show. It's like, it's there. Most of the time it's subtle, and a lot of times it does come out, but it's not there to judge anybody. It's there to encourage people, lift people up, and let them know you've got one life here on this earth. How do you want to live it? How do you want to have impact and be able to look back and say, that was a life well lived? So that's the show.
Okay, so I have a question because I have not heard your show. And you said for 7 years you were doing something and now you've transitioned into what your original mission was. What were you doing for the 7 years compared to the mission now?
Yeah. Well, at the time we thought we were doing it. So we kick off, we talked about, all the topics that, how do you perform better at work? How do you be a better husband? We brought those topics intentionally to the podcast, and it was just Brandon and Sean talking back and forth. Then we started bringing on guests who would be able to talk on the same topics, but now it was their voice, their story. And at some point, I'd say 2 or 3 years in, we started to get away from being intentional about who was on the show and just letting anybody on who had a kind of cool story to tell. Tim was one of those attempts to get back on track because he did have a story where he was stuck in life and came out of that, and he's doing what he's doing now. And so Tim was one of those earlier attempts to get back on track. But yeah, by the time Brandon retired, we realized we kind of just we have this guy who runs marathons. Why? Cool story. We've got this guy who does, I don't know, he had a home-based business. And we're like, well, why? It sounds cool. He goes surfing when he's not working. It's like, that's kind of cool. Like, okay, well, what's connecting the dot there? And so for the last year, we've been more intentional. I've been more intentional about who comes on the show. What part of the story do we share that is helping that person who feels stuck get unstuck? And then, so back to that inspiring story, and then connecting it back to one of those 5 F's. Is it somebody's faith journey? Is it somebody's family life, their marriage, or their parenting? Is it getting their finances in order, or their fitness, like that? But we're also including spiritual health, emotional health, not just physical health. Because if you focus on physical health, what winds up happening is you get a lot of folks who want to sell nutritional supplements. And we're like, we're not a nutritional supplement show. We're the holistic person trying to live a Christian life. So
now is the focus still on men? I'm curious why women are listening. What do you think is bringing women your way? Yeah,
some people theorize that the women hope that if they listen to it loud enough, the men in the house will hear it. I think the reason why is that there are a lot of independent women out there, and they're thinking the same thing. Is this all there is? Am I, how do I have the success in my career or business and also have the family life and also live the Christian life? And, there's this whole submissive talk. What is that about? And we never touch that subject, by the way, because we're like, no, we're not pastors. Well, Brandon was, and still is. But so I think a lot of those stories about, feeling stuck in life, looking up and realizing, wait, there's a different path out there I can take. Why don't I try that? Why don't I go after what I feel success is? Why don't I pursue what my definition of a good life well lived should be, not what somebody else told me. I was told going through school, you got to get good grades so you can go to college, get a degree, get a good job, and 20, 30 years later, retire. And the world isn't like that, and a lot of folks get, they're checking those boxes and they wind up with those golden handcuffs. And they realize those golden handcuffs look great with a 6-figure income and the benefits and the perks and the job titles and the accolades. But the reality is, I can't take a vacation, or I can't leave work early to go to my child's school function, or, I need to go take care of me and go to a doctor, but I'm given a guilt trip if I leave the office to go do that. And so the whole person kind of suffers in a sense. And I think that is a draw for women as well.
So we got another comment from W. Scott Green.
Oh, the Scott Green from Llama Lounge. Hey, Scott.
Yeah, I thought he might have been a guest. People are usually great guests. But why did you... Because almost in today's world, you don't hear of many programs aimed at men. I mean, why did you? I mean, obviously, it probably made sense because you have 3 guys as the original host.
Yeah. And
but have you ever been tempted to open it up to kind of women as well in terms of the focus of the show, or do you think that it's like because the whole world of gender is in a weird flux at the moment? But do you feel like you don't want to end up you can't really relate to a lot of the female issues, so that's why you're keeping it as primarily aimed at men, even though you've got a large female audience.
Yeah, it's kind of a blend of things. With the women part of it, it's the three of us had grown up with, this is what it means to be a man. This is how you become a Christian man, and had to sort out the things that were truly, healthy masculine type of things versus the caricatures of what manhood is. Like, got to be strong. Drink a 12-pack of beer. Lift weights, bro. All that stuff. We're like, what if strength was totally different? What if it was that self-restraint, that self-control in a marriage relationship? What if it was, that moment when you're angry at your child, you can take a deep breath and actually coach that child through the moment while delivering the correction that's needed. We were never perfect on that either, so we would share our own perspectives on that. I think kind of the neat thing is, as I hone in on trying to address this avatar of the show, so what I described to you is somebody we've named AJ, stands for Avatar Joe. So like AJ has a whole story. He's 35 years old. He's married to his college sweetheart. He has 2 children who are elementary school age. He earns a 6-figure income. He's a high level, like mid-manager type of person. Has the house 2 stories, picket fence, 2 cars in the garage. So everything looks great, except when he gets up in the morning, he already feels like he's dead inside. And that's because he knows he has to get dressed, get in his car, and sit through traffic for 30 to 60 minutes. 30 minutes on a good day, 60 minutes most likely. And once he's in the office, he's going to have to put out other people's fires. And at the end of the day, he doesn't feel like he did anything meaningful with his work, although he was there busy for 8 hours, maybe 10 hours. Gets back in his car, and he has to go through traffic for another hour, goes into the house, and he wants to reconnect with, he's always wanted to be that loving husband, that doting father, but he's so drained emotionally and physically and mentally that he has nothing to give his family. So when he walks through that door, and the first thing he hears is the family wanting his attention or complaining that he's not being plugged in, all he wants to do is go into his man cave or space and unplug and disconnect from everything because he has nothing left to give. And so that has an impact on his family life. And so I think focusing on that specific person, the show winds up talking about the things that impact other people. Like, they don't have to be Christian men in the 30s and 40s with children to resonate with, like, that resonated with me. That hits the nail on the head for what I'm going through. And that's been a big surprise for me over the last 7 years. And so I just, I'm grateful for anybody who listens, because it means that was the message somebody needed to hear in that moment.
Now, you have guests on. Are they telling their story and that's what speaks to the hearts of men? Or is it the entire conversation? Is it your anecdotes? What is capturing the hearts of men?
Scott, if you're still on here, you tell us. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, you said that. So.
Hi, everybody. Scott, we want to hear from you too.
It's him pleading the fifth right there. Yeah. I'd say it's a big part of the guests' stories. Every time somebody emails me or texts me in response to an episode, it's, like, hey, I just heard your interview with Patrick Morley, and, I've been looking for a resource like that. Thank you so much. It still pains me that a friend of mine, Mike Bettis, out of Corpus Christi, Texas, still to this day, every time I chat with him about podcasting, he'll say, hey, I love that you had Lee Cockrell on your show many years ago, because I listen to his show every single week and I never miss an episode. I'm like, great. Hey, when's the last time you listened to my show? And he goes, well, because of your show, I discovered Lee. It's awesome. And I'm like, great. Let me take this dagger out of my chest real quick. But it's Lee's story of being this poor, not a high educated kid out of Ardmore, Oklahoma, small town in Oklahoma, to go through life, work in the hospitality industry. And if you've heard of a place called Walt Disney World, in 2017, he retired as the senior vice president who was in charge of that whole area. And it's like, not bad for a kid from Ardmore, Oklahoma, who, had to join the army to get out of town and didn't do well in college the first time through. Now he's helping leaders around the world bring their best selves to what they do. So it's his story that resonates with folks, and it's his show that people found because of my show, and it's the tips that he shared. So like once you have that emotional connection with his story, anything that he shared as far as advice gets received, because people don't care what you know until they know you care, or that your story is similar to theirs. And so having a variety of folks who have gone through a struggle or felt stuck in life is the thing that connects with folks. And then the advice they have to give, like what's that one thing you want to share with somebody, that's able to be received because of the person's story. So that's why I blend the two.
Do you think you're offering a chance for men to be vulnerable? I know vulnerability can be a bit of a trendy topic right now. But I grew up, it sounds like similar to you, and vulnerability is something new, I think, that men are exploring. Do you think that right there hits the heart of men, and men are willing to get more vulnerable?
I think so, and I hope so. And when I look at the download data on the episodes, the ones that have the most downloads out of 329 episodes at the time we're talking right now, the top 5 include the power of networking. So it's, why is it important for men to connect with other men? Another one is on sexual impurity and how it had caused this guest to divorce his wife because he was looking at pornography. And they were apart for, I think, a decade, and they came back together. And now he helps other men address their porn addiction issues. And just to talk about that openly is like, oh, shoot, how does he know? Close browsers. It's not something that men will talk about in a big Facebook group or anything like that. Yeah. But hearing it and knowing there's somebody else out there who went through that struggle, I think helps them say, oh, I am not alone. Let me listen to more of that. Where can I find more of this guy? And another one was, it was a wife and husband who were on the show, and the wife had struggled with anger issues, and it was putting a strain on their marriage relationship. And so they talked about, as a couple, what they went through her anger. And then we even turned to the husband and asked him, so what was it like for you going through all this, and hearing his perspective? Because we've had men who come forward and say, it's not always the man who's in that heteronormative relationship. It's not always the man who's the aggressor. What do we do when the woman's the aggressor? And like, we don't actually know. We don't have that experience. And then there was a couple that had that experience, and they talked through it, and so that's been a popular one as well.
Yeah, we got a response, which I actually want to. I like this comment from Scott saying it's therapeutic for the host as much as it is for the listener, because I found that even on this show, sometimes you can find interesting things. What would you say personally are the lessons that you've learned from the guests that you've interviewed?
Oh boy,
things that come to you that like, oh yeah. You can give examples or not, or just say generally whatever. You've done a lot of shows. So a lot of people.
There are, from a professional standpoint, my income had quadrupled from the moment I started podcasting to where I am now. And when I look back at what are those moments, those key moments in my career where I was able to step up into the next level or step into a big project, I can almost connect a dot to an interview I had with a guest. And it was something I learned from the guest, either in the recording or before and after we hit record. And just picking up on their style of leadership, their style of communication, their philosophy on life. So a lot of moments where I felt like I was in the sequel for Slumdog Millionaire. Have you seen that movie where the main character is on a game show and he knows the answers to all the questions being asked, and they're asking, like, how do you know this stuff? And he's able to connect these painful points in his life. And that's where he knows these little tidbits of trivia. And there are moments I feel like that without having gone through an actual Slumdog Millionaire type story, or at least not that extreme. There are moments from the show where I had a conversation with a guest, and it was like, I know exactly what we need to do on this situation, and here's my plan. Boom, 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 boom. And it's just like repeat one of the guests. And, just like something like the idea of rounding on my team to see how they're doing during the day and building connection with them. Something I picked up from Dan Cockrell, Lee Cockrell's son, who was on the show. Gosh, what's another one? Andy Storch is always an inspiring guy. He fought cancer during the pandemic, and he does the same kind of work I do, which is training and development, talent development. And even just like thinking about getting out of my own rut, and thinking about somebody like Eric Giuliani, who he's from traveltall.com. He did the same kind of work. He was an education consultant. He was more in like the book sales, curriculum sales kind of thing. And he just kind of had this like, what's beyond the city limits of Pleasantown. And he just decided one day to take a leave of absence for a month, went to Thailand for the full month, came back, and the job that was supposed to be held on to, they went ahead and like hired somebody else out for. And he's like, oh, well, now what do I do? I'm unemployed. And so rather than go back into the matrix or corporate life, he decided, I've always wanted to travel the world, take pictures, shoot video, and I don't know how to take pictures or shoot video. So he took a month or two, took a class. So he's in a class. It's just inspiring for me to hear something like that. Like, it can be done if you have the right amount of savings set up, and you know your plan, you know how long you can go and how hard you can go. You can take 6 months to a year if you save up for it, to make that transition out of a corporate job into the thing you really want to do. And so it's given me the courage, I think, to make a transition. And I think I shared with you before we hit record. I just left my corporate job 3 weeks ago prior to this day, and I'm going for it. And it might fail. It's okay. My wife and I have a plan. We know how long I can go and we can go financially. So there's like this ramp up. It's like, that's what's happening in the next 2 months, and just kind of rest, regroup, but also plant the seeds to launch this business idea I've always had. Because my dream is to travel the world with my wife and share this message that Beyond the Rut has been all this time, and leverage my skills as a training facilitator and training consultant to give that lifestyle that I've been looking for. And then hopefully take the income from that and pour that into investments, because I don't know how much longer I'll be able to work or want to work. And, so I'll need to have like some passive streams of income going, or just some investments. And so I've had guests on the show who are real estate investors, just to pick their brain, get their idea, and what was their approach to investing. So.
Okay. So Jerry, what now with your podcast?
Oh man. Well, I mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned it during the actual show or before, but I dusted off the cobwebs from the original business plan back in 2015. One of the first things on that list was to publish the manifesto for the show. And I'd started that in 2019, and I realized just at the beginning of this year, that thing still is not published. So by January 2nd, 2023, that thing will be launched. It doesn't have a title yet. I sent the draft off to an editor a week ago.
Wow.
So it's like real now. Like I paid somebody to look at this thing and tear it apart and make it better. So I'm in the process of building a launch team for that. So if anybody's interested, just shoot me an email, info@beyondtherut.com. Tell me you're interested. I'll send you the form, fill it out. And I'll have different categories of the launch team, depending on what they're available to do. So that's number one, is launch that book. Next thing for Beyond the Rut is I'm doing it this week. I'm filing for the LLC to launch the training component of Beyond the Rut. It's going to be called, I'm not going to say the name right now because I got to get it filed first, and I don't want anybody stealing that name. It took some effort there, but it's going to be a training component to Beyond the Rut, to do workshops for companies, for individuals, do, performance consulting a little bit on the side, but it's going to monetize Beyond the Rut using my skills and talents and capabilities. And never been done before, but I'm going to try to be a guest on 100 shows. And so that's a big, hairy, audacious goal. And the only way to support that is for me to launch the business and support the family.
Does this count as one of your 100?
This one counts towards my 2022 goal to be on 20 shows. So I'm multiplying this by 5 for the next year.
So I've done 10% of your shows. I have to resist the temptation. I have got a few other show ideas, but I'm already kind of involved in 2 at the moment. Probably don't need another couple.
Man. Yeah. if you pitch a show idea to me, it's like, I mean, I converted a closet into a studio, and I love podcasting. It's fun. It's just, I learned so much from it. I listen to my own episodes. My wife laughs at me because she thinks, oh, because you love your voice on this microphone. I'm like, well, that too, but I listen to it because of the guests, and how do I interact with the guest? It's helped me improve my communication skills. But listening to the Lee Cockrell interview over and over again, Dan Cockrell, Jody Mayberry, yours, it's just it just reminds me of what's important in life, and it helps me get the most out of the day.
Okay, well,
go ahead, Tim.
That's still the question though, because usually we've got this thing like we do, one of us says it and then the other does it, and then sometimes we get so interested we forget whose question it is. I think it's my question, I'm not sure, but no, I was interested about the business side of things, because it's like I didn't know that you've actually got you're clawing your way out of the rut, aren't you? Of
yes,
full-time corporate life. So, I mean, because I kind of did this around 2014. I wouldn't say I've been massively successful in business, but one thing is that you always end up thinking it's going to cost you more to run your own business than it does. I mean, obviously, if you hire an office in like Shanghai, London, and New York or something, you run it like a startup, then you would run out of money quickly. But if you're just doing it, then it's so you're going to run a training business, and that's going to be based around the podcast, presumably. Right?
Yes. So some of the themes of the podcast will be driving it. But then, for the corporate world, they're going to need things that focus on leadership development, team building, and so having those on hand as well, but aligned to the premise of the show, because the show is really about living your best life and being aligned to what you want to do in life. And that doesn't mean you have to leave your corporate job, because you can work a corporate life. The idea is to get the most satisfaction out of that job and career. Align your values and your dream and vision with that of the companies, and be in partnership. And so I can help companies do that and help teams do that. Like, realize this is the vision of the organization. This is the vision of my team. Here's the vision of my people, each an individual person. And here's how everything aligns, and just see their bottom line grow because of that. Because we're spending a third of our day in a workplace, whether it's at home, in a hybrid situation, or in an office. At least a third of our day is spent for somebody who's not our family. And so make it like family. And
Jerry, how important is it to be vulnerable in the workplace? Is there a place for a man to be real in the workplace?
It depends on the culture of that organization. I think it's very important. I was in the military, and some of the best units I was in were the units where that leader was also a human. And the worst units I've been in were the ones where it was just like a meat grinder. The mission is we go do this training for a month. The mission is we go this and go there. And like the person who's just looking to check boxes on their officer evaluation report and to get promoted up to colonel and cash in on the retirement of being a high level officer. But then you had those who, to them, they loved being in the military. They loved being a leader. They felt it was an honor to be a leader, but they also valued family life. And so what I found was the officer who had a strong marriage relationship, wanted to be present for their children, also knew that it wouldn't be fair to go do that for himself or herself and not allow that for his or her own troops. And so you'd see that happen. Like, hey, my understanding is the elementary school's got this little shindig going on at 3:00. We're done today at 2. Get your stuff done, because I'm not going to stick around, and don't you dare give me a reason to make you stick around either. And you're like, okay. And it applies to everybody, whether you had a family or not. Like, everybody's scrambling, like, we're getting out of here at 2. Let's do this. And like, cleanest you ever seen the motor pool. All the tools are accounted for. All the soldiers are accounted for. We're hunting nobody down. And you're thinking, wow, we should do this every day. But yeah, even in combat, when you see that your leader is tired and they're tired, and they're not trying to be all bravado about it, you realize, all right, I'll do anything for this guy. And because he just had a moment of realness with me, and you just get back to work. You understand this guy's human too, just like me, and because of that vulnerability, you now respect that person as a person, not as they or somebody you can get mad at because they're a nameless, faceless, soulless person.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thinking even in times of failure and mistakes, at that point when we can own ourselves and people accept us in that vulnerability. Is that okay for the business world, the corporate world?
I think so, because people know. I mean, like, your people know when you messed up, and what they're looking for is, how do you handle it from there? When they call you out on something, are you going to say, "Oh, you are right. I asked for A, and I turned around and I said, no, I want B, but you've got all the documentation to show it was A." And I'm like, you are right. And I am so sorry. And I shifted directions on you somewhere, and I don't remember where that happened exactly, but I failed you. I didn't communicate with you effectively to tell you about the switch. But this is the switch we have to go take. So how do we get there? And now you invite the person, you're like, I messed up. That, no denying it. And a lot of times I wouldn't even need my people to tell me that I messed up and show me documentation. Like, the moment they brought it up, I'm like, oh, you know what? You're right. I do remember that conversation. I am sorry. And they're forgiving, but only if you own it. Because I've seen leaders where they don't own anything. They have to blame somebody for something, somewhere, somehow, even when things go well. And I think that's a big problem, is if you're in the business of blaming others to protect yourself, you go that CYA policy, cover your assets. Then you get in that habit so badly that even when things go right, you're setting the stage like you're on Game of Thrones, and everybody's looking at you like, why are you setting up scapegoats? Everything went exactly according to plan, but everybody's now watching you set up scapegoats just in case something goes wrong. And that diminishes trust in the biggest way. So vulnerability, I think, in the workplace is huge, because the most foundational piece for a functioning team, high-performing team, is trust. And vulnerability is the biggest, fastest way to build and maintain that trust.
And this is where it carries over into the family, I think. So you have both. If you're a certain person in the workplace, hopefully that's carrying over in the home as well. And so that hopefully captures the whole man.
Yes.
Yeah, even the whole woman, as you said, who listen in.
Yes, exactly. It's one of my guests, Johnny Serpola. He used to be the CEO and president of Camping World, RV dealer in the U.S. And his firm belief was, and is, that there is no compartmentalization. Men especially like to think we can compartmentalize everything. There's the work personality and the home personality. But the reality is, like, the character of who you are is there no matter what. And when the stress starts to hit and the stuff starts to hit the fan, the character comes out. And whatever barriers and filters you put into place, your character comes out in probably its worst form. And that is going to show whether it's at home or in the workplace. Now, if you're willing to cut corners at work, you're probably willing to cut corners at home. You are you wherever you go.
Well, I mean, there's a really good book that I read because somebody recommended it on my Book Chat Live show. It's a plug, called Black Box Thinking, which talks about how the airline way of dealing with problems, where you have if anybody tries to blame anybody, then that's almost like that's more of an offence than owning up to it, because airlines they can't take a risk that somebody screws up. They want to know exactly what happened so that it won't happen again. So the idea of black box thinking is that you do that in your own life, and it's all about trying to find out what the issue was and correcting it, rather than the usual blame game thing, which I think Christelle was kind of insinuating was a male thing, but I think it's actually more a US male thing, because when I was working in corporate, it was always like when we had American people in charge of us for a while, and it was always like the American thing is all about blame storming. Basically, we'd have calls where it was all about blaming people. That's not so common in the UK in corporate. So yeah, I think it's I think it's something that it's one of the evolutions of business, I think, going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. At some point in corporate America, it became about covering your rear end, setting up layers of protection in a sense. And I've never seen that go well as far as building a healthy team cohesion. The CYA approach always, hands down, creates mistrust, lower performance, and lots of turnover, because it's like, why is that person still around? Because that person is spreading lies about everybody in the room, inflates their contribution to the team, and really delivers nothing. But somehow they're the highest person on the team, and they're still here. And so you see these little signs, high turnover, except one person is always around no matter what. And it could be the person's been around 13 years, 20 years or more. But yeah, the military was really big on it depended on the unit though, because the after action review is really big about systems-based approach, similar to the airlines, that, what went well, what didn't go well, was it a process issue? And almost every time you'd identify that the communication lines weren't clear, or this didn't get done because we didn't have the logistics ordered ahead of time to get it to this place on time. So how do we fix the logistics line? So even though there are people who take accountability and responsibility for these things, almost everything was identified as a system issue by the time you were done. And then as a group, as a team, you identify, what are the 3 things we're going to keep doing? What are the 3 things we're going to start doing? And what are the 3 things we're going to stop doing because of this conversation? And that was with every patrol, every mission, every training exercise. There was an after action review. And you built trust that way, because everybody was open to feedback and accountability. And it was never like it's all Johnny's fault, or it's Carl. Dang it, Carl. And so that was the thing. Like, everybody was sort of an equal at that point. The commander of all folks had to take it. Like, the observer controller who facilitates the conversation lets that leader know, yeah, you're in charge, but during this conversation, everybody's got an equal say. And they're like, oh, I can't shut everybody up. And it's like, no. And every time you had a commander who tried to shut everybody up and control the narrative, that observer controller who was outside the food chain would be like, no, sir. No, ma'am. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And once that leader gave up that control, you would see more trust being built, more confidence in each other, and more improvements being made. Yeah.
I think I'm going to move away from this, because I think I have a final question, Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Jerry, I want to know.
We are slightly over time. So
I know we are. Final question. Answer it fast.
Okay.
Jerry, where is the first place you want to travel?
Yes. Oh, you said answer fast.
Oh, man. Yes, in South Dakota. Yeah.
Gosh.
You're okay.
I have a long list. So in my written life plan, my impossible part of that list, all the things I want to do and see, regardless of money, is a long list of places to travel. But I will say the most recent travel place I started pricing for my wife and I was to go out to Munich. I think it was Munich. Because when I was stationed in Germany, I don't know how, but I managed to miss 3 Oktoberfests in a row. Like, well, the first one, I guess not really my fault. I got there after Oktoberfest.
Well, it's not. Oktoberfest isn't in October.
It's in September.
In September. So that's probably why you missed it. You probably like Oktoberfest.
It's to fool the Americans. That's what it is. The Americans are going to come drink all the beer. We're going to do this in September. But it was Munich, I believe. Yeah, Munich. I did price it for Munich, and just kind of travel around Europe. But I also want to do a world tour of all the Disney parks. So we've been to Walt Disney World a number of times. My wife Olivia has not been to Disneyland, so I want to go there with her. I want her to see Tokyo Disney, the 2 that are in China, and wrap it up. Disneyland, yeah.
In Paris.
So that's on my bucket list as well.
Yeah. Well, it's like I was telling Christelle about all the US presidential museums that I've been slowly visiting. After I finish the States off, I'm going to try and visit all the rest, because I've done about half of them already. Like every US president, at least in the 20th century and 21st century, is their own presidential museum, and they're really interesting places. And they were scattered randomly all over the US.
Yeah.
So something else to add to your list. You can visit the, I think there's one in one in Dallas. Who was it? Oh, it's George W. Bush. He's in Dallas.
Yes, I think Lyndon B. Johnson has one as well.
He's in Austin. Yeah, he was the first one I went to. That's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm wasting time. So how can people find out about you and Beyond the Rut podcast, and how can they listen to Beyond the Rut podcast, and how can they hire you to solve all their corporate problems with leadership and the rest of it?
Awesome. If they forget everything else, the one website to rule them all is beyondtherut.com. And there you'll find the podcast. There's a tab there, and from there you can go to your favorite player and subscribe to it on your favorite player. You can sign up for the email list from that website. You can find my social media, my phone number's there, my email address is there. And over the next few weeks, I'll actually build out the tab for the business side of Beyond the Rut. But yeah, beyondtherut.com.
Beyondtherut.com. You can also scan our little code thing here that Tim always puts right below my face.
I don't think I've got Jerry's Beyond the Rut podcast website on it, but I'll add it, so it'll be there.
Panic. I'm like, I want to scan this now, see where it goes.
Go and add it in. But yeah, I'm a big fan of QR codes.
Tim, you need to get that
Tim's
fast.
website.
Yeah, takes it to my website, and then I think that's just got your Twitter handle at the moment, which is a bit on the rubbish side. Anyway, so thanks for all the people watching. We've had quite a few people watching, or at least the number at the top's been big. So
nice.
That's good. So clearly you're a popular guy, and the Beyond the Rut show is a popular show, and hopefully we can have you back next year sometime when you've turned into this billionaire global debonair traveler. Maybe we'll have you live from Munich at the beer festival.
There we go.
Might not be good from a sobriety point of view,
but not in October. It'll have to be September.
My plans will not be thwarted again.
Jerry, thank you so much for being here. We had a great time chatting with you and hearing about what you do, and kind of going a little bit more in depth about your guests and vulnerability event. That's always what I want to ask about. So thank you. Really
my pleasure, Christelle. It was an honor to be on here. Tim, always good to see you.
Yep. Great to talk to you again. And thanks everybody who's been watching.
Thank you. Bye.
This is what God requires.